Well, let's get started, everyone. My name's Paul Beyer. Welcome. This is Learning Lab. For folks who are new, we do this every Monday at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern. We're an analyst firm. Really, we're focused on practical use cases. So we focus on what businesses can use this technology, particularly now through the next 18 months. So very kind of practical stuff. Not that the other issues like AI, existential risk aren't important, and we should talk about those, but that's not the focus. Typically, these meetings are 50% business and technical. We've got a newsletter, lots of use cases. We're now up to 7 AI analysts, which is wonderful. We're really making a lot of progress in terms of shared learning and shared problem solving to customers, and evaluation of some of the news that we'll talk about in a second here. And really believe strongly in community. That we believe this is changing so fast that there's real value in getting together like we are here virtually, and also in person, that there's fantastic validation and idea validation, exploration, and shared learning. If you want, email me if you want to get added to the Google invite. Some folks find that easier. Folks don't know, we released recently a corporate buyer's guide as part of a premium subscription service we have. One of the things that's been very interesting in the last 3 or 4 weeks is this new service that we're trying to get the kinks out, but every day the analysts get together, and we have a person in India who looks at identifies the 6 or 8 top news items around enterprise Gen AI. And each one of those, we debate what should the classification be, with the idea thinking that we're in the hallway with a CTO or CEO or an AI leader. Is it essential they know this piece of information? Is it important, or is it optional? And rate those. And what's really interesting is the discussion. Someone might think it's optional. Someone might think it's essential. But what's really coming out of that is a lot of really good understanding of major trends. You start really seeing that this whole battle for the chip, you start seeing how much Europe's investing in getting their open AI. You're starting to see how fast the capabilities are of getting value out of video, and it's just not unstructured PDFs and text data. And we're trying to figure out the right form factors. But this is promising. If you're interested, and we're starting to receive the beta email, let me know. This Friday, Julio and Tim, who's going to be presenting tonight, are going to be discussing on Friday the 12 issues considered between open source and proprietary. It's something we hear a lot. We don't think it's exactly the right frame of the question, but we do want to walk through the issues and have a good, robust discussion, particularly as companies are trying to understand how to react to the debacle that happened at OpenAI. Rosemary, you want to share what this is?
Sure. So this is a way to add your membership of this learning lab to your LinkedIn profile. So as you can see down farther, I was able to add Gen AI Learning Lab, and we're going to put in the chat a piece of text that you can just use and add this to your own profile.
And then, Rosemary, we did that. Did you have to search for Gen AI Learning Lab, or was it already on? Is it already an organization inside?
I had to search for that.
Okay.
Right. And that's why you have to put the URL in. So when I'm finished here, I'll send over some text that people can just use as is or edit and add it to their profile. It does appear way down far on your LinkedIn profile, but that doesn't matter to robots who are scraping the page, right?
That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you for contributing. You've got one other survey. You want to share what this is?
Sure. So with Julio's help also, we created this AI Readiness Assessment tool. I'm going to put a link in the chat also for you to try. There's about 5 or 6 different screens to walk through. And what we're trying to do is to raise awareness among company leadership of where they are currently and where they need to be. At the end of this, you get a score, and you also get the ability to get your results by email. We aren't going to spam anybody, but there's also a nice big plug in there for the buyer's guide.
That's great.
So please share it.
And Rosemary, share a little bit what you're seeing in some of your clients. Is everyone fully aware and investing in Gen AI, or are people still trying to figure it out? Is it?
Oh no, we find that there's even a lot of people that are really just hiding behind ChatGPT and AI tools. They don't want other people to know in the marketing departments, which is where I live, that they're using these tools because they're afraid people will think that they're cheating or not as smart as they think they are. So I still see a lot of slow uptake on AI use and integration.
Yeah. It's one thing. I had a conversation. I don't want to say the name of the company, a big pharmaceutical company, and the VP of engineering there, 150 people in his group, and over there, IT is holding all the power, and they won't share it. So you've got to go through hoop after hoop to get official things. So it's really interesting. Rosemary and I started before we started the conversation. One of the debates we're having internally is where will the state of employee access be a year from now at these medium and large size companies? And I'm really starting to now think it may still be very little, particularly at the big companies and particularly in the regulated ones.
So, Paul, we think that the big problem is really going to rest with legal, because they're really not going to like us, starting new tools without fully vetting, which is going to take months and months of time. And, you know what lawyers are like, right, when it comes to risk.
Well, and particularly if in Europe, one company I was talking with, they have 33,000 employees, 22 countries, mainly in Europe, and they have 2 full-time AI lawyers just trying to be compliant by Netherlands, by France, by Germany, by Ireland. It's non-trivial, particularly in the European area.
But there's a great stat out there, Paul, that says like in 2 years, 80% of Fortune 500 companies will have a new title of a job that's, AI, totally AI. It'll be outside of IT.
I totally agree. So on survey front, one other quick survey. We're running one, finishing up on Gen AI adoption. I'll stick this link in as well. Here's one of the questions we ask is some of the challenges. Another one is which ones are you looking at? I don't think this would be too much of a surprise that OpenAI is way out ahead. We had certainly anecdotally been seeing Meta and Llama be the second one. This particular sample had Claude as the second most popular one. And this started before the OpenAI debacle. So it'll be interesting to see how this changes as we finish this up over the next 2 weeks. And then the showcase tonight is, and the showcase for everyone is 20, 30 minutes, either demo or presentation. Tonight, Tim's going to walk us through the 7 recommendations we have for current and potential OpenAI customers, and love to see where people disagree and or have other contributions. And in the last 10 or 15 minutes, it's open mic, where everyone 2 minutes you can have the mic and share something or ask information on solving a problem or share a fantastic image you created or anything you want. Definitely open mic. So
Rosemary, did you put your link in the chat? I was looking for that.
I'm just getting there.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So Tim, I think you're on the line. Did I see you? Tim, are you on?
I am.
Yeah. Do you want me just to flip over to the blog post?
That would be great.
Okay.
So we worked over the last few days, and we've had conversations at this forum a number of times. So please interrupt, raise your hand, and Paul, maybe you can keep an eye out if people raise their hands. So this can be an interactive conversation. I hope all of you have seen this already. And if not, we'll go through a brief review and then hopefully a good discussion on it. And so we started out just citing our basis for our perspective to try and give people some baseline ideas. And we do have some experience. This group here is an important part of that experience because we get a lot of learning at this group. It's called a learning lab, and I like it because I think it lives up to that name. We learn a lot from each other, and as Paul noted, in an early market, it's one of the things I really love about early markets. I've been fortunate that I was an early part of the PC revolution, an early part of the internet revolution, and now an early part of this AI work as well. And in the early days, people are friendlier, I think, generally. There's just a lot more openness because nobody knows as much. And Paul, we can see your email if that's what you want. Yeah, back there, that's where we were. So anyway, I think that's important to us. And we've learned a lot from this community. writing the buyer's guide was a big piece of research. We learned a lot from that. And just our general interactions, as everybody here, or a fair number of us here, have with our clients and other people that we know. The other thing we strongly believe is in the power of the big three. And at this point, and particularly with Microsoft, this is not a like or dislike or a political judgment or anything like that. This is look in the mirror and face reality. Microsoft still has an enormously powerful position because of their dominance in Office tools. Google's made some progress, but not that much. And while Amazon is the powerhouse still in cloud services, Microsoft is the powerhouse in Office productivity. And they have been smart, for the most part, we would say, in basically grabbing OpenAI by the neck, and they pretty much own them at this point. Although we saw indications that we'll get to in a bit that, own is too strong a word probably, but they do own 49% of the company. We do believe that OpenAI, based on almost any metric, is months ahead, which in this market is light years right now. Now, that may not last, and we'll see how it goes down. But right now, in terms of reasoning performance, integration of tools, ecosystem, pace of addition of features and partnerships and capabilities, they're ahead. They are the best by a good bit. It's not that close right now. So you don't even have to do much testing in general. Again, I don't want to get too far out there for specific use cases and other things. There can always be differences. But for the most part, ChatGPT is the place to go. And that's why they have as many customers as they have. And Microsoft, by being their big partner, is benefiting enormously from that, because most, in our experience, most large organizations are going to Microsoft as much or more than they're going to OpenAI directly. And that's our next point, which, as a result of that, Microsoft's going to do whatever they have to do. And they have, infinite is the wrong word, but from us mere mortals, it appears to be infinite resources. They just have so much money. They print more cash every day than most of us will see in a lifetime. And between that and their power in the market, they just have enormous resources at their disposal. And it's obviously very bad for them if there's any slowdown of this or any problems. So they are going to do everything they can to make sure enterprises feel very comfortable that it's all going to be okay. We also think, as we said, we're going to do this session on Friday. Open source is just another thing out there in the market. So, people always say, well, open source versus proprietary. And I was a technology senior executive at large companies and startups, and it's the wrong question. The question is, what do I need to accomplish? What technologies are available that help me or threaten me? How much do they cost in terms of immediate cost and total cost of ownership? Whether it's open source or proprietary is a secondary or even maybe a tertiary consideration. And then, as with all technologies, we prefer to think of them as tools, and the tools that are in the same category are interchangeable. The vendors prefer to think of themselves as unique and add as many unique features as they possibly can in a process known as lock-in. And so in early markets, it's just ever more important to try and avoid lock-in, because it's just completely unclear at this stage who the real winners are going to be. We can even say, well, we think Microsoft, Google, Amazon are going to be the providers of choice at the end of the day, especially for large organizations. But who they're going to source is another story. And even there are going to be battle royales between them. And you may be really wanting to change at some point. And so you want to do everything you can in general to avoid that, but even more so in the early going. And all we have to do is think of the last couple of weeks where the number one firm by far that's far ahead in capability really nearly disappeared in a matter of days. So it's something you need to take seriously. And that's really the rest of what the rest of these points are about, is trying to, you're going to have to do deals with the devil, because the features that you want are often unique. This is just like cloud provisioners. So yes, you can in theory switch from AWS to Azure to Google Compute, but it isn't that simple, because the native tools they built in are very valuable, so you want to take advantage of them. And as soon as you do that, you have some lock-in. So you make your deals and you just do what you can to be aware of them and go in with your eyes open. So that's the setup. And with that, we took a look over what happened at OpenAI. We were interested spectators, as I'm sure many of you were, and what the impact is when you're really talking about from the perspective of an AI executive who's, as Paul likes to say, ass is on the line. And so you've got a different perspective than a lot of people. So this is serious stuff. And the reality is that this was a material event. This was not trivial. Okay. So, there's a lot of people are going to say, nothing really happened. And our colleague, David Dalalo, who I highly recommend you follow on LinkedIn, publishes a wonderful comic once a week. And boy, he really got it. And because, OpenAI is going to want to make like nothing ever happened. Nothing happened at all. Don't worry. Don't look behind the curtain. After all, Sam is back and in charge, large and in charge. Now we have 3 old white men on the board. It's going to be great. And we'll see, but it was a material event at the time. And as I just mentioned, I personally believe, and I don't think you have to do more than read the newspapers, this company nearly went south, pretty nearly just completely eviscerated. And that would have been quite something. Now, Microsoft and Satya are smiling. Don't worry, whether they're at Microsoft, whether they're at OpenAI, everything's going to be great. It would not have been great. It would have been, they would have gotten somewhere eventually, I presume, had they all had, or some large number of them gone to Microsoft. But what if some large number of them didn't? There were 100 companies in Silicon Valley that have a lot of money that would have paid a lot of money for any number of those people. So it was one of those pretty close calls between literally life and death for that OpenAI. So you need to take it seriously, is our perspective. What can you do about it? Well, a lot of companies are already in or near production with OpenAI. Most of them, again, through Azure, but not all of them. And in that case, we do feel you're better off. As we said, Azure is not going to go crazy. They're going to do everything they possibly can at Microsoft to make this thing settle down fast and make you feel okay. But the reality is you got to consider what would have happened had this not worked out. You would probably, at the very least, have been in stasis for a while. No new features. Can they even maintain the product if all of a sudden half the staff disappeared somewhere? So you got to be prepared for that. And just in terms of what you normally do, maybe to a higher level. So what we think about is monitoring a little more closely, not trusting as much. So it could go either way. There's not to say that things won't get better now. They could get better because maybe they've gotten through the catharsis and they'll settle their governance and they'll get some more reasonable governance in terms of the different tensions that they have, and they'll move forward even more quickly than they have in the past. But there's clearly more risk, more variability in the outcomes here, and you've got to be prepared for that. So if you're planning on using new features that are coming out in the future, just be aware that there's more risk that those features are going to appear when they say and are going to be supported. So you just got to be even more risk conscious than you were before. And again, in an early market, I would assume any solid executive is going to be pretty risk conscious anyway, because you're dealing with brand new companies. It's strange to think about for us because OpenAI is such a juggernaut. It's large, it's got an enormous valuation, it's got boatloads of investment capital. But the reality is OpenAI, the commercial company, has really only been around a couple of years. It's a very young company. It still has under 1,000 employees. So it's not nothing, and it's definitely the top dog in the industry right now, but it is not Microsoft. So that's the basic point there. Let me pause for a second. Does anybody want to chime in here? Because I tend to go a mile a minute if I'm not careful and not give people space to jump in.
Raise your hand. Questions, disagreements?
Just wondering what you might anticipate might be changes to these recommendations post the AWS Reinvent conference this week and the anticipated announcements there.
Well, I'll take it. Does anybody else have anything to say on this? Because I'm not an expert, but I think the only thing I would say quickly is certainly you got to believe AWS will push Anthropic more than they probably might have been considering a week or two ago, because now they have an alternative platform potentially. Say, hey, if you're nervous about OpenAI, we've got Anthropic. No crazy stuff is going to happen there. By the way, they also have a binding board that has no financial interest, that controls the board of directors, that is interested in safety first. So Anthropic is not exactly a clean slate either in terms of its governance structure, but hasn't had any blowups yet. And so looks better on paper to most people right now. So I would assume AWS will push that. Although I don't know how publicly. That could just be more in the hallways and sales chatter. But I watched a couple of the sessions today. The other thing I'll note, they are pushing generative AI like crazy. And they talked about some really interesting use cases themselves. They are using it inside their security organization extensively, fine-tuned models that they have trained for code review, for identifying potential malware, and again, because of the breadth of subject matter that an LLM can cover and converse with directly to a security expert. So Gen AI is a huge topic so far in the talks that I've seen.
Tim, we have a question from Mike Novak. Go ahead, Mike, and then we'll go to JC. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just real quick. So what's your estimate for the number of companies that are actually in production currently with OpenAI? Because I don't hear and haven't heard a lot of them claiming even before this happened that they were that far along.
Yep. And I think that's right. I think to a certain extent, you have to define production. So if we define, if you define production as an external app, I think there aren't that many at all.
Yeah, I'd say probably less than 20, 100?
It's, it could be much larger than we realize. There's a lot of companies in the world. And smaller companies benefit more from these new tools and have less problems developing with them and using them. They can move faster.
So my second question I wanted to ask you about, though, is having gone through a few ups and downs in this business, the issues that you brought up reminded me of discussions I'd had on, hey, which ERP should we use for our company right now? Which database should we, several of those points tend to look very familiar.
Right. Very similar. And, OpenAI hopes they're the Oracle, right, of the industry. They hope they're or the Microsoft.
The SAP.
Or the SAP. They hope they're the dominant player at the end of the day. But it's very much information economies. If you want to really go into the geekdom of that, you can read Brian Arthur and the other people who wrote initially about path-dependent economics. These kinds of markets tend to concentrate very rapidly.
Go ahead. We'll go JC, and then we'll go back to finishing up the 7. Go ahead, JC.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and team. Thank you for the recommendations. At the bottom of the list, there's sort of a recommendation to sort of have dual initiatives, essentially some with OpenAI, some with other models potentially. Did you have a sense, and I think it makes total sense, you basically don't put all your eggs in the same basket, but do you have a sense for the budget impact of implementing these recommendations? Is it like a 2x, 1.5x? So if you have to budget a certain amount for your LLM strategy with OpenAI, how much more now do you have to budget in order to be able to have that redundancy?
Well, I think you have to compare it to the budget you have. So it's hard to say a relative number, but it should be small, actually. So if you're in production, for instance, and you're doing significant development work, let's say with OpenAI, I wouldn't expect an experimental line to be 10% of that cost. I'd expect it to be very inexpensive. In nominal dollars, it's hard to do much at a corporation for less than $1 million, $500,000 maybe. Just hard to do much for less than that because that's just a couple of people. But the cost of the systems is not that large, especially if you're just experimenting. The key is to be in the game and really using them and not just saying, this is like, I consider this analogous to security. So everybody's got a backup plan. Everybody's got a system recovery plan. Everybody's got a security firewall. How many of them actually test them on a regular basis? Well, serious corporations do. They use products, they use red teaming, they use penetration testing. They actually attack their own systems to try and cause these problems, to make sure that the security systems aren't just there, but they actually work. So that's the key here, and why we're saying you need this experimental line. John Fiocla coined the term, this is what they do in manufacturing. They will have these experimental lines. They're very low cost and very small, but they let them actually be in the game with these other approaches and technologies rather than just having a plan. And that we think is critical. You really have to have some hands-on experience rather than just a paper plan that says, gosh, if we have to move off OpenAI, here's what we're going to do.
Although to your point on that, Tim, it's a little different because in this case, it's me taking my code out of OpenAI and moving it to Anthropic. It's not, oh, well, I'm using one VPN, I'm just going to switch to another. We're all using HTTP. It's all standard. We're all cool. This is much more.
But it's the same, right? I agree. And I would say it's the same kind of thing as doing a hybrid cloud model. In theory, if you're using Azure or you're using AWS, it's kind of the same. But if you have a lot of Ansible and Terraform and other CloudFormation tools that you're using, you have to know the similar processes in AWS. It's not just pick up your code and drop it down in Azure. You have to have some experience. And I've said the same thing with cloud providers is you need to have a little bit of an experimental Azure tunnel. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to do these things in order to make sure you're capable in those areas. So I'd say the same thing. Your prompts, you need to test your prompts across models because you may need to do some pretty significant, some pretty different things across these environments because—
call it refactoring, maybe. I don't know what you'd call it with prompts, but I'd say refactoring, maybe.
It's more complicated because we don't have a standard evaluation process since these things have probabilistic outcomes. And so I think we're going to be learning a lot. And that's important. You suddenly realize, oh gosh, I really do need a prompt library. And I really need not only a prompt library, I need a prompt library organized by use case and then organized by models, large language models I've tested it by, so I can have all that data at my hands to say, okay, this worked in OpenAI, but in Anthropic, you had to do it this way to get a similar kind of result. That's and right. If I want to build Llama, that's a whole other thing. Now I have to understand how to build an open source model or find an organization. Where's the red hat for Llama going to come from? And I'm sure there will be corporations that do that because, again, the open source stuff is going to be probably too much for most organizations to want to grapple with raw. But there will be organizations that will use these tools and stand up services that will compete, I presume, with ChatGPT and Claude and the other tools that are out there.
Go ahead, Lucinda. We'll do one more after this, and then I'll go to open mic. Go ahead.
Yep, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for these thoughts. I think this is really good, and drawing the lessons from the OpenAI Game of Thrones was quite amazing.
Pretty much what it looked like, wasn't it?
Yeah. But actually, so I just wanted to kind of double click on the prompt library. Can you show an example of what a prompt library is, or how do you even think about it? Just kind of build out some thoughts around that, because I do keep track of my prompts. And when I get something from OpenAI or Bard, I always include the prompt and the printout, and I kind of keep a running thing for my particular topic in a Word document, so I know kind of how I got stuff. But I know that there are a lot of other things like, always saying you are an expert in blah, 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 and you don't make things up, and you always tell the truth, and you are, sensitive to blah, blah, blah. So
I think we're going to be learning. I don't think there are any really good standardized models out there yet, but I think you made one point. Well, first, what I would say is pick your database of choice. I would actually pick the vectorized database because my sense is you're going to get recursive on this really fast, and you're going to use the large language models on your prompt libraries to work on them. But you're also going to want a straightforward database that says, just find me all the prompts for this use case. And I think just the way I would think about it, and I don't have the answer here, I just have my own way I would go about it, is I would organize it by use case, by model, and by corpus. So in other words, I did a lot of natural language processing over the course of my career, starting more than 30 years ago. And this is a problem with any NLP. Anytime you start to get into unstructured data that has semantics, You have a problem. Oh, we just made an improvement, quote unquote. Well, what does that mean? How do you tell it's improved if you're reading text and answering questions? What's the difference? Mm-hmm. So as an example, back then, the term sick became cool because, if you remember your kids around the turn of the century, oh man, that's sick, right? And that meant that was the best thing ever. So if you wanted to read text off bulletin boards at that time, because there wasn't, Facebook and all that stuff, you had to know that sick meant good. And now if you change your model and you say sick means good, then if it says, oh, she's sick in bed, it misinterprets it. So it's very complicated to do these kind of things. And you have to start to develop these libraries, these corpuses of text that you can at least run and see how the answers come out. And you start to develop an idea like a regression testing library. So that's what I'd be thinking about is, how would you create a regression testing library? Well, you have a repository. We have code repositories that are structured for that. I would start with a text repository, and I'd probably look towards a vectorized database so that I could do similarity searches and feed it into an LLM if I wanted to, but also do regular kinds of searches on it as well. And you made the point that there are meta level issues as well, like instructions. So it's not just the prompts, it's also the context instructions that you can give. So there are those things as well.
Also, the one thing I'll throw in, Tim, I've been starting to use a knowledge management system. There's one that's open source called Obsidian, like the rock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you can use that same purpose of, I need that prompt over here. It's associated with this. And you put it together yourself so you know where it is. But then in 3 weeks, I go back and, oh, man, where's that one for left-handed nurses dealing with such and such a condition? I can put in the words and it'll go out and say, oh, here are the three, and semantically put them together for you.
Right.
Great.
Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
No, I just want to take one last question after you comment on that, Tim, and then we'll go to open mic. Go ahead, Tim.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. It's more interesting to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah. So, and Lucinda, I was kind of interested in your thoughts. I mean, you're working on this. You've got clients who are saying, get this out. And this whole conversation we've had the last 20 minutes is do all this extra work, documenting, testing, slowing down the project for risk management. Does it feel painful? Does it feel prudent?
Well, I mean, for me, it just means that so for the use cases to do this stuff with is like not something where you have a lot of downside, like there's a severe downside if you get it wrong, like a patient diagnosis or something. I mean, it still feels to me like it's a co-pilot and it always needs human supervision. It's not like an autopilot that you can just massively scale unless it's stuff where, people don't expect things to be absolutely right all the time. So I feel like there is a tool set evolving, as we are doing this, that standards are evolving. It's still brutal to, at least for me, to program with this because it's like they're just stuff that doesn't work and there's errors and there's hard to find. And because not many people are programming in it, it's hard to there's no Stack Overflow for it. So a lot of stuff is just hard, and it's because of this just nascent and non-standardizing. And look at the announcement with OpenAI, right? And with the announcement of the GPTs. I mean, that was like putting a lot of startup businesses out of business, or a lot of startup businesses to seriously consider what else do they have to do, because a lot of their stuff that they built just got sucked onto the platform, which is, of course, it's a time-honored tradition of platforms to take great ideas and incorporate to the platform, make it free. So those are just a couple of thoughts on that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Thanks. So, Tim, thank you very much. Wonderful summary of all the stuff I know we've been working on and getting a lot of questions on. So I want to move to open mics. Open mics, get the mic and share things you're seeing or things you want to share. I mean, I've been really trying to track my personal usage of Google versus ChatGPT, and I'm really finding myself even maybe 20, 30% of the things I used to do in Google that I do now in ChatGPT, and I've been meaning to do a whole summary of that. But I'll start that sharing, and we'll go to RC. Go ahead, RC. Sorry.
RJ, yeah. Hi, everyone. My big question, everyone, and I know maybe Microsoft might be already rolling this out, but is there an AI application where I can actually write an entire document with AI help and not just rephrasing. I want to actually, have it help me write the document, and I want to actually see the results in the document. Is that something that that Microsoft is already implementing on their enterprise level? Does anybody, and is there any other alternative?
You're saying you want to do it in a Word document? I mean, what you're describing, I've done extensively just in ChatGPT. So
Me too.
when you're writing the document, again.
I was just going to say, we had a person speak at our conference from Narratize, and I've used Narratize, and it's really pretty good. Takes you through a whole structured, there's different document purposes, and it takes you through a whole structured process, and it's really, I found it quite helpful.
Yep,
and you're actually, okay, sorry.
Well, Jasper will do this for certain kinds of documents as well.
All right, so it'll actually co-pilot with you to actually help you write the document, and you can actually see the results in the document. You don't have to go to a little chat window and say, okay, good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it structures the whole thing, and then it can do improvement. But what I love about it, it's great on a blank page. Hey, I have an idea, I have a point of view, but and it really just step by step in a helpful way asks you the right questions, and then puts it together, and you can tell it, what kind of a document it is. Is it a pitch for a business? Is it an argument? Is it whatever? So it's quite good.
And
Rosemary, you want to talk about what you just wrote in the chat? Because I have not used Microsoft CoPilot, or Google has one too, I think, that they put into their Google Workspace, right? Yeah, I think you're on mute, Rosemary.
Oh, thanks. So yes, that's called Duet AI. So that costs about $24 a month, paid on an annual subscription. I'm only spending a small amount of my time in CoPilot because all my clients are using Google instead of Microsoft. But yes, in my testing of CoPilot, you can do a lot of things like you're talking about right in there, but you have to pay for the subscription. And it's about $30 a month.
Right, $30 a month. And then you get basically ChatGPT-like stuff baked right into Microsoft Word.
Right. And in PowerPoint and Excel and all of that.
That's good.
Thanks so much, because I think that's going to really get people's attention when they can see that capability. Because up till now, if you can just maybe use Bing Chat, Compose to just write a little tiny email or a paragraph or something, that's not enough. You can't even interact with it really. Once you put your prompt in, it does what it does, and then you maybe can edit it, but you can't say in another prompt, okay, let's take this a little further. So you guys are all saying that you can cut, just from blank page, like you said, just really go at it and see it in the document. You don't have to worry about the language model just sort of going crazy and losing it all. Okay, thanks.
Rosemary, go ahead.
I was just going to say that to me, there's a real negative with Microsoft, and you're going to be required to install the Microsoft Edge browser. And I just don't want to use that because all my extensions are in Chrome.
Yeah. It's one thing I thought Ethan Mollick from Wharton noted, which is interesting, was that Microsoft's taking a very different approach than Google. So Microsoft's putting CoPilot in each one of their products. We had Andy Roberts here last month, talked about they have 35 plus CoPilots, CoPilots for Word, CoPilots for Excel, CoPilots for this. And whereas it appears that Google's working a lot more of, here's all your data, use a CoPilot to get your data from spreadsheets or docs or PowerPoint, spreadsheets. But go ahead, David.
Is this the beta VHS wars all over again?
Absolutely.
So I have a bigger kind of suggestion, and it might be a sideline conversation, is that there's some great people on these calls, and I'm wondering, in addition to GAI Insights, your organization, do you believe we could come up with a project that might be something that would kind of bind us together from a, dare I say, a business standpoint, but more of when it could be an association, it could be a business, it could be helping you, Paul. So we could. The thing that happens is if we have something in common, then the decisions and discussions we have are relevant, because if you're using Google and you're using this, it's great to kind of share what we're learning about. But if we had something that we were working on simultaneously, even if it's a pet project, we could learn so much more and apply it to something. And it takes a village kind of thing. So I'm not trying to say I know what that is. I'm just wondering if that's something that we could have a breakout session on and talk about what those topics should be. It might be stopping wars, and it could be saving the planet. I mean, who knows? But we should apply this stuff to something that might bind us.
Dave, I think it's a great idea. This has been very experimental from the beginning. The first 3 months, we just said, this is an experiment. We're not going to do this next week unless everybody wants to do it. And people kept wanting to come back. So I think if people want to self-organize and start bringing some things, I know there's been a couple suggestions on having a Slack channel, pros and cons in that. We have a few people trying to do a LinkedIn group. The third thing I've heard is to come up with we started putting a buyer's guide as well, as just a standard definition that's for the executive for these different terms. What should executive know about vectors, or should they even know about a vector database? What should a executive know about? So that
a glossary, if you will.
Yeah, glossary. Yeah, a glossary. Yeah. But not super technical. Glossary.
Right.
It could
be dynamic. It'll evolve, and we can all add to it.
Yeah. Someone else had their hands up. Who did I miss? Go ahead, Adam.
Thanks, Paul. I do have M365 CoPilot, so I have it in Word, PowerPoint, etc. And I shared a screenshot just to show, like literally in Word, where you can open a new Word document and it's inline in the document that you're doing the chat. It's building it. Then you can say make it shorter, etc. Happy to do a screen share sometime and walk through that as well.
How do you get it to appear in your Word? I mean,
you have to have a license to M365 CoPilot. There are 40 something different copilots across the Microsoft ecosystem, from the one that's in the GitHub to the one that you use with Bing Enterprise for chat, to the one that you can use in things like Word and PowerPoint, to I think the separate one that you use for like with Power BI. That's their whole thing. Is the CoPilot is actually a bunch of solutions. That's the branded name for just AI helping you in their ecosystem. So there's different ones with different licenses. The M365 CoPilot just became generally available 1st of this month from Microsoft, and you pay per seat.
And Adam, it feels like $30 a month for Copilot GitHub, $30 a month for Word, maybe $30 a month for PowerPoint, $30 a month. I mean, I'm already paying, and that's why I'm so fascinating that these companies.
If you have an enterprise license like an E3 or an E5 with Microsoft, that's sort of the standard names for them. The E5 is the higher security uplift and more of that kind of capability. You can say, I want 10 M365 Copilot licenses. You might have 1,000 E3 users, but then you say these 10 now have access to it, and it unlocks it in Word, in Teams, in PowerPoint, etc.
So I missed Deanna. I missed someone's hand up.
Yeah, I just on and on, back and forth. But the person that thought of working on a project, there was that prompt library that we were talking about. Like, what's the prompt library? I mean, that could be a project that we work on together. And how do you do that? So, and then for me, and then for me, as far as the difference between like ChatGPT and Claude and all that stuff, the way I'm looking at it, maybe not to the extent that you guys are, but for me, if I want to go out and reach out into the internet and get more information. So, for example, who are my constituents? What are they? How can I actually connect with them? What are some of their major issues that they're working on? Go out, find the websites, check them, then send them back, summarize them, blah, 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 So that's how I'm seeing the difference in the two, the difference with the Bard and then the Microsoft, and then, like ChatGPT and Claude, where they're kind of the databases, not open to, it's only got a certain amount of data. So that's kind of a different concept, the way I'm looking at it at this point when I'm talking to different people.
Deanna, do you have a go-to? Do you start with ChatGPT or Pi or Perplexity?
I actually moved to Claude. I like Claude better than ChatGPT. The answers that it gives me are more, ChatGPT seems like it's a standard answer. Claude, it brings in more of my personality and stuff like that. It's more related to me. I like Claude better than ChatGPT. And then I am using going to the edge, going to Microsoft's to do some of more so than the Google one. I don't know why. I don't know if I have necessarily a reasoning for it. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll do 2 more questions and finish up. Go ahead, Anna, and then we'll finish up with Tim.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Paul, again. So I want to just, what I've noticed in my practice, and maybe everybody's doing it already, but I just want to point this, that because of the long-term memory in ChatGPT, I've already created many types of different assistants. Some assist me in code, some assist me in text preparation, thinking process. Another one is comparing the documents. And I kind of working with them interchangeably. So each day I have different tasks to cover. And this AI worker, helps me. And I think this is a notion of universal AI worker, or there are a lot of startups over here that are reaching out to see what the use of AI worker is. And I think it's coming. The more and more I see that one. So if you're not doing that, so save your different workers in your sessions and just pull them up and teach them more and start more conversations with them. And I wanted to ask actually the community. So very interestingly, recently I just wanted to compare different resources on kind of semantic analysis. And I was able to ask questions with the access to internet from ChatGPT, but I want to focus on the specific data sources and the specific links only. But it pulls up everything. Did anybody do it before? For example, you have only 2 links with access to the internet. You want to use only that for your analysis and focus only on that information.
Lucinda, you have something in chat. Is this addressing Anna's question?
Somebody had asked in the chat, who likes Perplexity? So I was just saying I like Perplexity when I need citations that are non-hallucinatory, because it's really, that's one of the things that get made up a lot is okay, this article by this author, never written. And then somebody else said, well, what about Claude? And I'm I like Claude on occasion. I think it's more succinct. I think that ChatGPT can be a little chatty sometimes, a little bit verbose. But it's not as good as GPT-4 from what I understand. But right now I'm just using, So I move around to the different ones. I just wanted to keep on top of what's changing, what's going on.
Anna, is that what you're looking for? You were looking for a large language model that only uses specific citations or only picks one, like a search engine?
Yeah, specific citations in terms of give them the links to the web, right? And it only uses that information, not going beyond it. And you say the Claude is better in that way?
Well, no, Claude, I was just making a general comment on Claude. But for citations, I like Perplexity. I mean, I'm thinking that if you ask it to summarize a particular model or ask it to only pay attention to this article, I think that most of them will do that pretty well. I mean, what's been people's experience on that?
I mean, I'm comparing 2, and that's where it struggles.
Okay.
That's what I was very, very interesting. Why?
Yeah. So Perplexity, I guess I'm just saying, if I'm asking for some information and I want it to give me specific citations, then I make my question to Perplexity because I want it to be focused. I want to get real citations.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go to Tim quickly. Chat Custom GPT is a tool that a number of people looked at, a no-code thing where you can specify what your data source is and get the power of it. So there may also be some solution.
Thank you.
But I just want to finish up. Go ahead, Tim, and then RJ, you got a real quick one as well. Go ahead, Tim.
I'll be really quick then. I was just going to encourage people, you can sign up for free for the Amazon Reinvent keynotes. I think they're worth watching. Again, everybody's so focused on OpenAI and ChatGPT. Always good to see other perspectives. And Amazon is going to invest a lot of money. I think their strategy is still in process, we might say, but they're going to be a player.
Yeah, great. RJ, finish us up here.
Yeah, and to reply to Anna's question and to everybody, a lot of these LLM providers have their own Discord where you can go and you can ask questions and so on, and also get the latest updates on. So I would recommend everybody to always, if you're interested in a particular provider, make sure you get their Discord and get into it so you always can see it. And whenever they have a news item pop up, you'll see the little red number count on the top of your Discord screen. So that's been very, very helpful for me to get news and also insights on particular large language models.
Wonderful. So thank you, RJ. Thanks everyone for another great meeting.